Yo,
Hey, how's it going?
it's going well. I just finished up painting some Guild Ball terrain and a goalpost, actually.
Oh, cool. Is it one of the goalposts that's like from the company, or is it your own creation?
Uh, Both. It's a broken toed goalpost that I wanted to marbleize, but I fucked it up. So then I mixed up some metallic pigment and some purple ink, and I was like, well, let's see how this looks. And it kind of looks like, those coins they gave out at tournaments for like first, second, third best painted?
Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Cool. Oh, you're silent, I think.
Happened. Hello, internet. Am I
Oh, there
back?
you are. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Dope.
Um,
Uh, so yeah.
Sweet. I put together a vassal room just in case we need visual
Oh
aids
yeah,
again.
I should join that. That sounds like a plan. So, the finishing off the guilds, very exciting. However, I've been thinking about the things that, since I assume this is the final of our meetings, if I don't ask, then I will have to figure out on my own, and good Lord, I can't do that. Uh, I still don't really know the difference between kicking and receiving outside of like literally my dude gets a jog and you get a momentum.
Hmm.
Or rather, I do.
Yeah.
But I'm not really sure why it dictates such a different captain selection and play style.
Hmm.
Uh, Other than like it might relate to how we were talking about shepherds and their quick setup, or
Hmm.
farmers in their quick setup rather, where it's like is if you're spending time getting the ball and I'm just coming at you, then I would want a captain that wants to rumble, something like that. Anyway,
Hmm.
that's one thing I'd like to talk about, and then the other thing is like the 101 on jailing, uh, because it's a thing that the game has kind of become about, and even though we talked about last time, it's like, you know, kind of cost you 10 new players and not super fun. It still is important.
Hmm.
And I ended up dropping a question to you that came up when I was watching one of your recorded games on Discord the other day. Um,
Oh, you sent
I'm
me.
not sure if you.
Oh, I don't know. I'm just seeing that now. I don't remember seeing that before. I'm so sorry I didn't respond in text. I,
That
I must have
that's
just
totally
gotten.
fine. Like whenever I sent you that question, it was like, hey, like if you get time, whatever, answer it. If you don't, I don't mind at all. Like I
Hmm.
figure this is something you're just doing out like on your spare time. So if I didn't feel slighted or anything.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
but
first of
yeah,
all, we can definitely do a fourth session, especially because, like, I think for completionist's sake, it would probably be nice to go through all the guilds. But I think the things that you're listing right now are probably actually more helpful for me to answer than describing some guilds that you're not currently trying to play. So, I
okay,
mean,
dope.
so I think we can expect to do a fourth session. But let's do these more general questions now because those sound fun. It'll be a fun change of pace. And
Okay, let's do it. So, the question that I put in Discord for the people who will either listen to this on stream or watch it later on YouTube
mm,
was I ended up watching a game that you played on the Impart Wisdom channel, so the channel that you're likely watching this on, which was Guild Ball 4.2 Butchers V-Boar versus Hunters Scatha. And the timestamp that I sent was 36:17.
yeah, I'm gonna see if I can
And
pull that up for my stream. But keep talking, keep talking.
okay, killer, yeah. So you are in the middle of battling a Scatha that is deep in your territory and certainly dead. And then this is toward the end of that turn. You end up taking the kill with the boar before he starts going south to mess up the rest of the hunters. And I'm
Mm,
curious because she was literally on 1 HP, and post the tackle, I wasn't sure why you killed her because this seems like the sort of primo premium ultra good jailing scenario. And so because you didn't jail here, I must not understand something about jailing. Like, so to me, the value of killing her next turn is she's already activated this turn. You're not depriving her of that. if you kill her at the top of next turn, you're also depriving him of his captain's activation all throughout the next turn. You already took the ball from her, and she's surrounded by butchers, so killing her does not seem that difficult. The reasons that uh, my guesses as to why you didn't were it was more efficient to have either influence wise or activation wise to have Boar kill her now. You were trying to make sure that she couldn't get encouraged. Not Boar, any non-Boar attacker would not have as reliably killed her, or her having her there is enough of a snapshot threat that it was worth playing around it. Um, but yeah, I don't. Beyond that, those are my four guesses. I don't really know why uh, why else you wouldn't have killed her there.
Hmm. Okay. Let me take a look at this. Uh, Unfortunately, I'm having trouble getting this onto a browser source. That's probably let's do it. I am not what people would typically call a good streamer, so um,
Nice,
I'm
nice.
trying to get that on the screen right quick. Five. So we're gonna do a tackle and a knockdown.
In a
Okay.
past life, I was
So we're gonna
IT, and I
do
realized
a
about
tackle and a knockdown.
5 years ago that I still have
Okay.
the mindset of a troubleshooter, but I know nothing about today's technology. So it's kind of like I just never had that career. Very
Right,
funny to
right.
me.
Okay.
Then
All right, I finally got it running. Um, okay. Um,
yeah. All right. We're going to buy an attack on her. So plus 2 dice. So
okay.
10 dice on a
I
2-0.
think I
Yep.
remember this game,
7 dice.
and looking at this,
Will be anything I want. So we'll do a billion damage to kill her.
um,
Sounds good.
yeah. Okay, so I think
And then I think we will pass
I'm gonna
the
confirm
ball
something
to
by seeing
Roast
basically what I
and
do with the
Ballistar.
rest of.
Or its activation.
No,
So 3
actually, with
dice, needing a 4.
so
Gets
the
it.
activation
And Roast
afterwards.
will dodge 4 inches.
Um, okay. My opponent went for raw enthusiasm.
Holding the ball. Actually.
I think you go for orange
Yeah,
slices
yeah,
because
that's correct.
you just take 2 poison on each model. It's like
Alright.
you don't you're crushing him
And
on
that'll be the
momentum.
turn.
Yep. Yep, that's it.
Okay.
So
it's
my dudes take 2 damage
how did I
from
how did
plus 1.
Vor end up?
Okay. Okay, dokie.
All right.
Let's see.
Enough of that. And back over to this. Okay, I think the answer to this question. Yeah, this ends up going kind of poorly for me because Boar doesn't get the look on Cena that he wanted. I think looking at this, I'm pretty sure the answer to this question is basically that I felt that my best first activation of the following turn was Boar in going into Cena and trying to take Cena either straight up down or um, get Cena to the point where he's obligated to activate because he's going to die immediately to one of my other teammates. And yeah, so I think the idea here was that Skatha was jailed, but I did not want to spend any of my turn 2 influence on finishing her off. And to
Got it.
me, in that situation, it was more important that I get the whole rack of Vetbor's attacks onto a key target at the start of the next turn than it was to keep Scathe off the pitch for a long time.
So if any of the following are true, that kind of changes the calculus. You had the fact that you wanted to activate first with specifically Vet Boar
mm,
and go down and have the full clip to annihilate Cena or do stuff in his team with a full Vet Boar. But like if it weren't as time critical to do that, you could have just jailed her and killed her later. But otherwise, you run the risk of effectively not going first because if you don't use Boar or whoever to kill Skatha, then she can activate with her stacked influence, no matter like however much he puts on her.
Right. And I think, yeah, okay, so there's two sort of circumstances that are unique to this game, to that game. One is that I had Shank really far up the pitch,
Mhm.
which is a good position for Shank if he doesn't immediately die, and he's very threatening to models that are coming back on the pitch, right?
Right.
Which is something that Shank is always good at, and so I think what I was thinking there is if I get Vetbor to have that good first activation where he like knocks down Cena and either kills Cena or gets them into a bad situation, then um, not only have I killed or partially invalidated Cena, but I've protected Shank from Cena, and then Shank himself is threatening Skatha from coming back on in an advantageous position. So it's not so bad that I've had to kill Skatha in turn 1 and let her back on the pitch in turn 2, because I immediately
Because
have
she's
another threat.
right. She's
Um,
kind of not coming back on the pitch in an effective way anyway.
Right. And then the other thing, and this is more of a matchup thing than that specific game, but Roast is one of the hardest models for Skatha to take the ball off of in the game, because his counterattack is so devastating and she needs to hit through him because most of the time she doesn't have setup from her team to like clear Glut Mass with some ranged attack or something. And so basically, in turn 1, she's actually pretty good at that as long as you can, if you can get somebody close enough to Roast to shoot him. But that becomes harder and harder to engineer safely if the Butchers, as the game goes on, if the Butchers player just keeps Roast behind their team, because then anybody who tries to shoot Roast is just going to get killed.
Has
Um,
to go through the butchers, right?
right.
And so on turn 1, Roast is kind of out in the forefront because he was movement speeding people
Mm,
and trying to get that first charge going. So Skada can rush up, proc resilience, and then fight through it. But later on, it's like right now, if anyone wants to get to Roast, they've got to get through 4 kind of Cinnamon definitely, and then Meat Hook and Princess are, tangentially there.
right. And then they still have to hit Roast.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's like a situation where if I successfully get my models up the pitch and putting pressure on his models, then Skatha's goal threat, as long as Roast is holding the ball, gets worse and worse over the course of the game. So
Mhm.
the fact that I'm kind of allowing Skatha to return to being a threat on the pitch doesn't feel like as huge a deal to me as it would in some other circumstances, I guess, or in some
Okay.
other matchups. Um,
But other than that, like that is the concept of jailing, right? Like you have this model that is effectively prisoner's dilemmaed out of being assigned influence, trapped
right,
amongst like your entire squad -1, literally at 1 HP and knockdown.
right.
And like so the default strategy there, unless you can figure out a way to gain value out of it, is just like, okay, I will kill you at the top of next turn.
Exactly. And I think, I mean, in like almost every other version of that game, you'd see me do that, right? There's like, I mean, if you're looking at footage of me playing, there's plenty of footage of me doing exactly that to models or captains, and probably including Skatha in other
Right.
circumstances. So,
Okay,
um,
so me seeing the fact that you killed her there, like this was like anomalous, right? Like this is
right.
worth examining. Okay, cool.
And it's also it's
Because as
worth
soon as you killed it there, I was like, oh, maybe I just don't get it. Like I should ask about this.
pointing out in the interest of full disclosure that actually I'm pretty sure that doesn't work out for me in that game. Though I think part of it was, if I remember correctly, Vetbor rolled not great on his charge on
Yeah,
Cena, and
he
Cena
he
had a
ended
sick
up
counterattack.
missing
So
a bot attack. It was pretty nuts. Like
yeah,
he rolled literally not a 3.
yeah,
So
yeah. So
it could have been the fact that Shank bought Berserk and missed it. I don't remember, but regardless, you rolled like 5 dice and didn't get a 3, and it
yeah.
went badly.
So I think even it's fair to say that even with all of those, in my opinion, good reasons why you shouldn't jail her, there, if you spend a lot of time looking at that game, you might discover that jailing her would still have been more sort of safe. Like there's less dice involved in the outcome of the next couple turns, and you can play around that in some way. I don't know. I don't remember the game that well, but I wouldn't be
That
surprised
valid.
if
Like
you discovered that.
this thought process is kind of the answer to the question, right? Which is like, am I evaluating the correct reasons? Like, am I
Yeah.
thinking about the reasons to jail and not to jail correctly? And like in situations where you don't jail, like you have to have a specific thing that you're trying to accomplish, and even so, like the option to just jail across the turn line and kill the model is a default good safe strategy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay. Excellent. And like a lot of times, the jail situation is kind of opt-in, if that makes any sense. Like they are presenting the threat that is going to get jailed.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're doing it by like ox pull or dog kidnap or whatever, where it's basically like I will yank you away.
Hmm.
And yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I think so you definitely have like an understanding of the basic strategical reasons for jailing or for not jailing. Um, but I think maybe jumping off of the point about why I didn't jail there and why I was so interested in getting Vetbor to use his whole set of attacks at the start of the second turn, there's a lot of even if someone wanted to be very pessimistic and say that uh, that jailing is like basically always the right option and that there's not a lot of strategical variance in that circumstance. I think that there's at least a lot of tactical variance in terms of what models you pick to sort of enact the jail, both in how you make it happen and also what models and in what circumstances you choose um, to execute the model. That is to like kill them at the start of turn two. So I think I actually kind of want to bring up just like a sort of, if this is okay, a
Yeah. Let's go. I mean,
here.
it's similar to the question of like one could pessimistically say like, oh man, whenever you can take the queen in chess, you should do it. Like it's kind of a non-thinking problem. But like,
Right.
yeah, except that like if you're in a position where multiple queens are going to get taken or the queen is being threatened, like which piece you initiate the duel with does matter, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
what else, like if you take with this piece, you're no longer threatening this area of the board with that. So like the tactical breakdown is still an interesting choice. That
Mm-hmm.
does make sense to me.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna do this, and then so I think even though there are a lot of reasons why farmers are sort of hard to grok for newer players, I think that they present a good where in the hell are the harvest markers? There we go. They present a good opportunity to talk about this type of thing because their roles in a team are very binary. There's the planters and the reapers, and they do different stuff, right? Um, so okay, so let's say we have something like this. I don't know, and this maybe. Um, okay, so let's just imagine we have somehow initiated this jail on Wellington by the end of turn one, and you're the farmers player, and you are going to win initiative on turn two, so you're trying to figure out what model you will kill Wellington with to start the turn, because you've decided
Mm-hmm.
that it's correct that your first activation should kill Wellington and then do something else. Um, this is probably a nonsensical jail. Don't really know why Wellington would be there, but we're just going to roll with it.
Yeah, whatever. Fiat that this happened. I
Mhm.
understand.
So I think actually all the three farmers models that I have put on the pitch here, even without putting the ball on the pitch, which would definitely change things almost certainly, depending on where it is, all three present relatively interesting opportunities. So the most hit E one, the one where you just go and smash stuff. Actually, I'm going to back this up a little bit. There we go. Is Thresher. So the advantage of going with Thresher and doing this is Thresher makes one attack here, killing Wellington, and then he's able to walk 5 inches over here and start smashing other people. Here, I'll move Cinnamon and Pepper a little bit closer. But like, so you're gonna get extra impact on this. So your first activation is not only gonna be executing your jail. If you activate Thresher, you're gonna begin putting damage and pressure on other models, which is cool. Um, the downside to Thresher in this circumstance is that this is a suboptimal activation for him, and what I mean by that is two things mostly. Um, one, at least in one of the opponent's defensive tech on the models you're going to walk up to has not been stripped yet, which is Roast's Resilience. And
Resilience, right?
typically, when you have your best hitter, which is definitely Thresher in any team that includes Thresher,
Right.
when you have your best hitter going to go hit somebody, you don't want them to spend one of their influence pulling resilience off. So if he is interested in hitting Roast in general, this is a bad time to do it. If he is just going to engage Roast and hit Cinnamon or Pepper, then this is fine because Roast is just there and that's life. But another way it's inefficient is that someone like Thresher who gets a quote unquote free effect, which in this case I'm talking about Don't Fear he doesn't actually have a way to activate it here. I've positioned this harvest such that he could activate it on just Roast, but that's not very interesting for the reason we just described, which is that Roast is kind of a shitty person for him to target, at least at the first activation of a turn because of resilience. We don't want to waste any Thresher attacks. But if we go over here, we're kind of losing that. We have like an opportunity cost issue of not being able to use Don't Fear this turn.
Right.
Right. And then I think finally there's a more nebulous downside, which is that this is moving Thresher this way will almost certainly do a lot of damage to whoever you end up deciding to hit, but he's extremely vulnerable. Like if he ends up like this down there, then your team is not really protecting him at all, and he is still your most important model. And you're kind of there's definitely a chance, at least given that Cooks are a very hitty team, that you're trading a jailed captain for a jailed captain. But which I don't. I mean, there'd have to be more information on the pitch for me to decide for sure about whether that's advantageous.
Whether
it's
worth it. Yeah. Like
but
this is completely outside of whether like we don't have an overarching situation, right?
Right. So. But just baseline, that doesn't sound very good. I don't like Thresher dying. So, okay. So that's the pluses and minuses of Thresher. Then there's Tater. So Tater is almost certainly going to be your secondary hitter in any Thresher team. You might have Windle on the pitch, in which case maybe Tater's like tertiary. But he's definitely second fiddle to Thresher at least, and he might be also second fiddle to Windle. Tater has a 10-inch threat range, so he could do what we just described with Thresher. He could be allocated 4, and he could hit Wellington to kill him, then charge Pepper, I guess, in the circumstance, and hit Pepper and Roast for a bunch of damage with his what is it called? Sweeping charge effect, and then make one more attack, and almost certainly kill Pepper if you want. And he'd be engaging those two guys. We'll even move Cinnamon up a little bit closer. Okay, we will if my thing behaves. There we go. And this is a good way to do that. And Tater is also putting himself in a vulnerable position by doing this, but it's not as big a deal if you lose Tater as it is if you lose Thresher. He's not a captain. Right. There's also a second option for Tater that you can do here, which is that you could allocate him 1, have him kill Wellington, and then walk up to here, or maybe like something like that. And so what that's done is it's killed Wellington and it's activated Tater's Fork Off, which is his countercharge defensive Thresher. So to me, this reads as like a better circumstance for Thresher than activating Thresher. Doing this thing right here, it takes away the opportunity cost of one of your primary beaters not getting to put his full clip of 4 influence into somebody, which if you had the influence to allocate is sort of a shame. But if you know ahead of time that this is what you're going to do, you only allocate 1. You get 2 momentum out of it, 1 for the kill and 1 for the momentous attack, and you get countercharge up.
You also can't you can recoup the influence loss by putting it on someone else relevant. Like,
exactly.
And maybe not Lamb in this situation, but the other model that's not present.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so while I would say this is not advancing a game plan of killing all the dudes in the same way that moving Thresher up is, it is executing your jail while either keeping the game state in your favor, or I would say even adding advantage defensively, because now you've got a countercharge available that you didn't have before, and Thresher's still in a really good position to go hit people later. He just doesn't have to do that right now, right? So to me, I would prefer this move over activating Thresher. I think there's very little downside, and I think the upsides are pretty good. But there's a third option, and this is sort of, I think, if you can get away with this type of play, it's almost always the right option when you're executing a jail, which is to keep tempo up while activating a support model rather than one of your primary hitters. So what I would do, and what I would think would be the best option, roughly, at least, would be to activate Lamb with one influence, I guess, or maybe even two. Sort of depends on how many harvest markers you have. If these are your only two harvest markers, I would have two influence on him. So let's say he's do that. Let's say these are our only two harvest markers, because that's actually kind of exciting. Um, so Lamb walks over here, and Lamb makes an attack on Wellington, and hits any result and takes the sow the seeds, and we're going to put another harvest down, and we're going to slap it right here. And then he makes another attack, and he takes some unmomentous. He gets any result, and he kills Wellington for unmomentous damage. Right. So you've still gotten two momentum. It's cost you two influence, but then Lamb will go ahead and hit the Planting Master button, which allows you to put two more harvest markers down. And we're gonna slap one there.
Which means that now you don't have to make the opportunity cost question of don't fear the when you do what you actually want to do with Thresher.
Right, exactly. And so we'll just slap him over here, or yeah, like one there and maybe one here or something like that to give Thresher a little bit of room to groove. And so this activation costs two influence as opposed to the one that Tater cost, but you've gotten the same amount of momentum. You've activated Fork Off. What is Thresher's thing called? Crow Scare. You've activated Fork Off and Crow Scare passively for yourself, and you've increased the threat of Thresher on those three models down. So you've meaningfully improved the activations of these two people we were talking about as having some sort of opportunity cost by going early, and you've still executed your jail and kept yourself at a reasonable momentum amount to protect yourself. So I would say that this is like, and I mean I intentionally constructed it this way, but I would say that this is like clearly the best option of the three. And I want to highlight this because I think when people learn about the roles that characters have in lists of six, there's the killy ones, there's the supporty ones, there's the goal scory ones, the defensive ones, blah blah blah. They sort of get hung up on those, and they don't understand when they understand that there are suboptimal times when you, for example, have to have a striker kill somebody because they lived on 2 HP. Everybody understands that that's something that you might have to do in the future. A new player does, an expert player does, whatever. But what people don't think about, I think, is when models behaving outside of their role is not just a necessity for things gone wrong, but is actually strictly optimal. And
Right.
I think that thinking about how farmers want to do the majority of their work with reapers, but sometimes execute game plans with very specific styles of planter activations, um, is a really important, to me, a really clear way to illustrate that. So that's what I was going for.
Yeah, I mean this makes sense. It's basically like uh, finding if you have the like you don't want to use your best card to kill the creature, right? Like this applies in a bunch of different games.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like this this setup was the bronze silver gold of what you want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like clearly your goal is still want to kill Wellington, and here is the three ways to think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, thinking figuring out that Lamb can not only be a quote killy model in this situation, but also enhance the killiness of your killy models, right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
makes the whole turn better.
Yeah, and I think like if you successfully set up a jail on an important model, the execution of the model is like a time to get creative because you have this sort of colossal tempo advantage, and how you implement it is sort of how you optimize that time where you're in such a clear advantage is I think a lot of what makes people who are good at playing fighting guilds good. So
Yeah, because anyone can figure out how Thresher deals the last point of damage to Wellington, right? But
exactly.
like, if it turns out that like, well, I effectively gave up my captain's activation for your captain's activation, so I still have an advantage literally because I have the points and I got to spend more influence, but like, I didn't really get the most out of the situation that I could have.
Right, exactly. So yeah, anyway,
Well,
that's
that answers that for me.
okay, cool.
I'm I'm happy that I got like the sort of John Madden whiteboard as well. Like seeing it in action makes a lot of sense. Um, the other sort of 10,000-foot view question was on kicking versus receiving,
Right.
and why that's such a big deal. Other than just like the answer could just be, well, you get a jog and they have the ball and you get a momentum. But like I feel like it's more than that because of like talking about captains like, oh man, I would never kick into X team with X captain. I would always play this captain instead. Or like, I only put this captain in my rosters for games when I kick against my bad matchup or whatever.
Mhm.
Like that doesn't. Those sorts of strategic decisions don't make this that much sense to me based on that one, in my opinion, not minor but not major difference in gameplay.
Mhm. Yeah. Let me think about how to walk through this. I think the central difference is that so at the start of the game, after the kickoff, the kicking team has a positional advantage, or at least should if they've chosen even a reasonably like decent kicking model and moved them forward on the pitch. Um, but the receiving team has an expensive way to exert a lot more control over the pitch. And I think traditionally, it's so goofy to say traditionally for like a 4-year-old, 5-year-old game, um, but like in days past, I think it was generally accepted that receiving is preferable because there were not a lot of models that had such powerful threat ranges that they could kick and basically threat you no matter how far you backed up or how far you spread out. And
Like
so a lot of
vitriol,
time,
mist, etc. Like
yeah. And so a lot of receiving teams would basically just win momentum by passing the ball around and sort of play keep away and then try to like edge up the pitch and start the game on turn 2 with more control over what's happening. But I think both the addition of the momentum to the kicker and also a sort of general expansion of threat ranges in the game has flipped that. And I think a lot of people, myself included, would now say that kicking for most teams is preferable most of the time. Um, and the reason for that is that you don't have as much control because you don't have the ball, but you do have the ability to spend all of your influence setting up very specific dream situations, and a lot of good teams are very good at threatening things from far away now. I think the Navigators that I'm playing right now are a really good example of that. I think they really want to kick. I think they have like a very strong kicking setup in almost every pitch circumstance because there's pretty much always a way to get Fathom to be kicking from a position where she can use her heroic off of terrain.
right.
But I guess so the other thing about the ball, and this is a better way to think about it, is the ball. The person who has the ball is the person that sort of can choose where the fight happens. So if I have the ball, if you kick to me, you have to come interact with me. But I do not have to come interact with you because I have a way to not interact with you and score 4 points. And you do not have a way to not interact with me and score any points. So in some like comical like AlphaGo optimized gameplay, there's like a circumstance where both teams do nothing until both players have clocked out to 8 points, and then the team with the ball scores a goal and wins. Um, so since
Right, but I mean, also like not only do I have a non-interactive way to score 4 points, I also have a non-interactive way to generate momentum and get extra movement, right?
yeah,
And
exactly.
like, so I dictate where the fight's going to happen, and I can be the only person who is generating momentum through solitaire. And
Hmm.
so like all of these reasons still seem to like I am of the naive camp that still believes that receiving is better. I acknowledge that the stats say that kicking is better and that you say kicking is better, but it hasn't entered the intuitive part of my brain yet, just the logical part of my brain.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's tough because I think your instincts are mostly correct, and it's sort of how I think about the game too. But and it's been tough for me to like get over my feeling of that as well. But I think okay, so before we get more into that and more into like why nowadays I think kicking is preferred, um, and just compare ox and fillet really quick in terms of kicking and receiving. So Ox and Filet are really binary in terms of wanting to kick and receive. Filet's really good on kicking and not that exciting receiving. She's okay. She's not terrible. Ox is awesome receiving but horrible kicking. So Ox himself is not that fast, and he's pretty vulnerable to counterattacks. He really needs to hit his knockdown, and if he has to charge for it, he's only going to get 3 attacks after that, or 4 if you have Roast. He's 1-inch melee, and he has a 9-inch threat, as opposed to Filet's base 10-inch threat that she can boost herself, also, right? Um, on top of that, Filet is usually a bit better at dealing with counterattacks, both because counterattacks are worse against her, because 5-0 is kind of a pain in the ass, and because she can dodge into base to base if she starts hitting people, which doesn't invalidate every counterattack, but certainly invalidates some of them.
A lot of them. Yep.
Yeah. And Ox can push people into base to base, but he can't do it while damaging them, and also it's unmomentous, so that really sucks. And then a final point is that when Filet ends her activation, she can dodge out of melee with people for the same reason, and Ox really can't unless he wants to really cut his damage. So, we've already talked about these playstyles, so you know that Ox in general kind of wants the fight to be near his aura, so that
Around him, right? Exactly.
so that he and his team can benefit from this really easily. So that's a really good indication that he wants to receive, because if he kicks, so what does 5 inches look like? If he kicks from here, he brings his aura with him, which means 2 things. One, he's making himself very vulnerable to try to get to the place where the stuff is happening, and also he's really not bringing his team with him because he doesn't have any way to speed his team up by himself. You can do that with Cinnamon, but it only goes so far. But he's really like leaving the team behind instead of supporting them, which is what he wants to do. So he would much rather receive, because there's at least some circumstances in some matchups where Ox will literally just like sit no more than this far up the pitch for like the whole game, and he'll just be like, "You have to come over here. You have to come over here, and we're gonna fight. And when you come close, my whole team is gonna be within walking threat of you. So I'm gonna maximize the amount of attacks I get, and all of the attacks I make are gonna own, and I'm gonna win like that because my whole team is like right over here." So.
Right.
He really wants to receive because he doesn't have a good way to get his team up efficiently and safely to use the thing that makes him good if he's kicking. But if he's receiving, there's a really good reason why his opponent has to come over here eventually, right? And Filet is the opposite. I think in our first session we talked about sort of siphoning influence through Filet.
Yeah, you stack it up all up on her, and effectively she is the like arbitrage unit where you spend all of your influence through her.
Right. So by default, this is what Filet is threatening after she kicks, right? This is where she can take all of that influence you spent on her. And if you're taking Cinnamon, which in my humble opinion you absolutely should be, that actually looks like that. And if you're really in dire straits and you don't mind spending a little bit of influence to make herself faster, which I would never recommend, but sometimes you have to, then it actually looks like that. That's where you can put your entire stack of 13 influence if you really want to. So that's kind of a far cry from like this. Right? I mean, like, it's
Right.
it's just, and I don't even think the Filet is like one of the best captains in the game, but you can look at this big ass circle and you can be like, wow, I really have to play around all of that. Like, I either have to get out of there so she doesn't do something, or I have to think really hard about my positioning such that when Filet does go over and hit my stuff, no more than one model is affected, and that one model hopefully doesn't die instantly, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
Ox just doesn't do that type of thing. So that's a basic idea of how to think about which models want to kick or receive. And obviously,
So
not all.
just to play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Let's say that Filet receives. She still has that bananas threat, right? Like, why is that different? She theoretically could be even further up because she could dodge with the ball.
So that's true, definitely. There's a couple things that make this difficult. So one is we've talked. So the description of Filet's threat. Actually, okay. The simplest one is that we've moved her up 7 inches for free by kicking.
The free jog, right?
Right.
Got
So that's a big difference on its own. especially given where the opponent's models start, right? I think that's, and that difference gets bigger the faster your model is. Filet has one of the fastest jogs in the game.
Yeah,
In fact, I
it
think,
doesn't get much faster than 7 jog.
right. I think only mascots have higher than that. But anyway, um, but I think more importantly, so the entire time that you're receiving, there is pressure on you that does not exist for the kicker at the start. So let's say I kicked off with Fathom as this poor butcher player's opponent, and I don't know. So let's just say her base threat at the start of the activation, without worrying too much about like terrain and stuff, is like this. And then say she kicked off with terrain next to her, so it's actually like this.
Right.
Okay, so she's kicked off of somewhere over here. She's kicked the ball over here, and it's mildly annoying to get, but it's not like the butchers literally can't touch it. The problem is two things. In order to set Filet up with the ball, um, to use the ball as threat range, the butcher players have to move models in order to move the ball to Filet, and the entire time they're doing that, by which I mean it's going to be like 3 or 4 activations or whatever the hell, they have to be thinking about the fact that Fathom wants to take the ball and score the goal, and also they have to balance the fact that buffs that you want to put on Filet have ranges themselves. So, like, for example, okay, roast could be start over here to make sure that there's no way that he can like sneak a ball all the way up here that I can't get, right? And Roast is weirdly a fast guy, so he can get that ball
Right.
and
Yes.
and he can kick it back to my team. He can like jump over here and then finish his sprint by being back here. But not only is that 2 influence, 1 to sprint and 1 to kick
One
out
to
of my
pass. Yep.
13,
Mhm.
but it's also at no point has he put his buff on Filet. So he hasn't even paid for it, let alone had any opportunity to be within 4 inches of Filet. So either you need to compromise with something like this, which is a good way to do this for Cook's buff specifically. Not all buffs work like this. You put the turn up the heat, or I'm sorry, the get it while it's hot on Princess, and then later Princess walks it over to Filet, right?
Such that she can activate starting in it. Yeah.
Right. So you have to do that. That's another influence. So that's already 3 influence on Roast. And also, again, look at this stupid fucking Fathom threat range. Like this whole time, Princess is like ferrying the ball, or whoever else you have here is ferrying the ball between models that Fathom can absolutely tackle off of trivially.
Right.
Um, so like so Rose spends 3 influence here instead of the 1 that he would spend to set up Filet if we were kicking. So the the receiver gets all of the benefits that you're thinking about, and that you're thinking like, wow, they have all the tempo, they have all the control, they decide where the game is and how it happens. That's that's pretty good. um,
Mhm.
but the penalty they suffer for it is it's very expensive to actually use that effect, and if they don't use that effect, their position sucks. So if you let's just say instead Roast or whoever the hell is just like fuck this ball, I'm gonna be over here with this forever. I'm never speaking to any of you again, right? So
Right.
the Butcher's player has successfully defended the ball from Fathom. Fathom's at least without a lot of machinations and stuff, which the navigators could probably do, but it'd be expensive and complicated, blah blah blah, and there's probably other
And
stuff in the way.
telegraphed and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is Fathom's not getting this goal turn 1, right? However, Fathom's still in a position to generate momentum. Fathom has a lot of warning for when Filet tries to get all up in people's grill, and Filet's threat actually doesn't look that great anymore. It looks like this with just Cinnamon, or it looks like this with Cinnamon and her quick footing herself. So it's totally reasonable to expect the Navigator player to be like, okay, fine, I won't get the goal, but my team is gonna, at the end of this turn, my team is gonna look like this, and I'm gonna win momentum, even if it's only one. If it's like 1-0, that maybe that's literally how the momentum turns out. But the kicking player wins that, right? There's all this nonsense over here. So suddenly you're kind of feeling like you're in a bad way. But really, Fathom has plenty of opportunity to make momentum on her own because she also gets the last activation. So if you protect her from Fillet or you move her back with Wander and then she charges in, then
Mm-hmm.
then the Navigator's player can be up, I don't know, 4-0 or 5-0 even. And not much has happened there, but the alleged benefits of receiving have been entirely squandered.
Neutralized, right?
Yeah, right. So I don't think it's ever been a losing decision whether you kick or receive. Um, but I do think it is really impactful, and I do think that I think that being making good decisions in your draft means thinking about, first of all, if you're the kicker, how you would capitalize on the kicking benefits to put extreme pressure on your opponent, and second of all, as the receiver, thinking about how you would manage the economic tax of having the ball and the pressure that your opponent is bringing to take advantage of the fact that you have the final say of where the game happens. Um, and I also think it's worth saying that kicking is easier to think about than receiving because even just right off the bat, the receiving player has to deal with the scatter of the ball, which model is kicking, and like what the terrain looks like in relation to the ball. The kicker has to deal with the terrain and has to think a little bit about the matchup, but you can kind of shadow play out a first turn, at least the first like 3 or 4 activations as a kicker in your head, because there's while the opponent is scrambling to get the ball into a
Getting the
safe
ball and
place.
passing and doing all of their nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. You can kind of just optimize your first few activations. They can be like, okay, this guy goes this far, puts this buff here, and stands menacingly with this person in threat and this person not in threat. Or, I put the harvest markers down exactly like this, such that my countercharge from Tater is live by activation 2 in exactly this way, or stuff like that. I think in general it's a lot easier to plan as the kicker than it is as the receiver. So
Hmm.
that doesn't strictly mean it's better, but in sort of the practical experience of playing a tournament, it is helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, like the the other thing that a lot of people who don't play competitive games might not know is the fact that like tournament mental exertion is cumulative. Like the
Totally.
less thinking you have to do at any given time, and the less time pressure you're under. Like if you go to clock every game and like yeah you won those rounds, but like if you're going into the semifinals or the finals having been taxed, not having to you haven't drank water or taken a walk around outside or whatever, like you're
Right.
just at a disadvantage. So anything you can do to minimize overall thought on the day does make sense.
Yeah, exactly. Is that sort of making sense? At least why someone would come to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
conclusion about
So
the kicking?
the huge thing for me is even though I made the devil's advocate argument against it, like seeing just how differently Filet behaves rather than Ox in terms of I think that the thing that sank in was you dictate where the fight happens. Like Filet doesn't give a shit because she can go anywhere. Like
Yeah.
she's just a Visa card and you give her some buffs and she goes anywhere, right? Like
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Ox doesn't do that. Ox says, "Well, I'll make the fight right here because right here is my house of pain, my little 6-inch zone of unhappiness where all of my people do more damage."
Hmm.
So, I think that's making sense. So then I guess I just have to think about the play style of each captain. It's less about the kicking and receiving and more about the play style of each captain. Is like
Yeah.
I had, and that's kind of a like I don't know, nitpicky sort of like persnickety way to think about it, but like that mental shift for me is making a huge difference. It's not really about the kicking or the receiving. It's about how your captain wants to play the game,
Right.
and either kicking or receiving normally enables that,
Right.
as opposed to before where receiving was just better because
Mm.
you didn't have a momentum and the game was different. And
Right.
now it's an actual choice,
Hmm.
and a lot more models because of the way power creep works in this game have more threat and are scarier and are better. Therefore, they take advantage of the kicking stance better.
Yeah.
Not because kicking is inherently stronger, but because the strengths that they have are more synergistic with the benefits of kicking rather than the benefits of receiving.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, yeah, there are some teams where even just the momentum for kicker changed a lot. Like this whole thing I said about how obnoxious Fathom is kicking, that doesn't happen if she doesn't start with a
She
momentum as a
can't
kicker.
heroic, right?
Right.
Exactly.
So, yeah. That literally just added 4 inches to that model's threat range on kicking, which is a lot. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, circles are weird. Turns out they gain a lot of area with each inch.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
it's not just an inch, it's pi r squared.
Yeah.
All right. So I think those are the two big scary topics, I guess, like
Okay.
the sort of one-on-one stuff. Um, I guess we could dive into a few, if not all, of the remaining guilds, and because I guess we're not going to hit all of them, we can hit ones that might spiral out of control. So, the the three most interesting ones that are left for me
Mm.
are Masons, Morticians, uh, and
Oops, I deleted the ball.
hey, is that just it? Masons, Morticians,
We haven't done rat catchers for I
Rat
assume
Catchers.
since we haven't done
I
morticians.
feel like I get Rat Catchers. In any case,
Okay.
the reason that I'm interested in oh yeah, it's Hunters, but we already did Hunters. So the three guilds that attracted me uh were uh the Order because I like their aesthetic and I thought that the Ball of Light was cool, but I don't think I like 3-0. Like I just think
Mm.
that that's not my playstyle, even though I happen to be the best at playing them right now. Um, the Masons and the Morticians, and the reason that I thought the Masons were going to be the guild, like before I had even purchased the model, I liked the idea that the Masons were, if you're fighty, we're football. If you're football, we're fighty. I
Mm.
can reallocate influence throughout the turn. Honors superior strategy is just like one of the coolest plays in the entire game, in my
Definitely.
opinion. Uh, and like setting up synergies between like I mean I think that they are the most transformational guild on the back of their squaddies in the way that some guilds are transformational in terms of their captains. I think whether or not you have like vet chisel or granite or vet harmony just like changes how you play
Definitely.
pretty substantially
Hmm.
in a way that like a lot of the other like if you exchange one cook for a different cook, like your team is either more or less optimal unless it's whichever one has the AoE blast. Spice maybe
That's
sugar.
sugar. Yeah.
Okay. I think if you don't play sugar, the guild's pretty different. But like other than that, the guild is like
Mm.
not that different. But I think that like each model you take, each non-captain model you take in Masons, other than maybe Flint, just like drastically changes how you're playing the game and what you're
Hmm.
capable of doing. Uh, and because of that, I thought that they were the most flexible and adaptable. And I tend to be the type of player who, like, I don't know, maybe this is arrogant, maybe this isn't. Like, the more decisions that are made in the game, the better I will feel about the game. Like,
Mm.
I want us to be thinking and deciding all the time because, on average, I believe that my decisions will be better than yours, at least at a game that I'm
Fair.
good at, right? So, like, I don't want to be playing aggro and I don't want to be playing combo. I want to be playing like control in some way. And I don't mean control in the literal Guild Ball sense. I mean control in the sort of overarching game archetype sense, where it's
Mm.
like I want to sort of always have the tools to execute what I want to do, even if it means that like I guess I'm doing it suboptimally. Like I guess Lamb will be the fighty one this time, right? Like I
Mm.
because what I've done is given myself the tool suite with which to accomplish any goal. I just have to figure out like given infinite time, I could figure out how to execute this plan with this guild.
Hmm.
Uh and that's super cool to me. I also like the fact that like coming into this is going to be the first dice game I actually take seriously because most dice games aren't fun.
Yeah.
I like the fact that their color pie is LOL miss a lot, right? Like we're good at the bottom half of our playbook, and I'm like, yes, sign me the fuck up. Like
Yeah.
what I want is to not have to rely on top end results, which is
Mm.
also why I thought Brewers were exciting before I really understood that they were supposed to be reliable early on, and then if you actually want to kill something you need to sort of spike or set it up. Like
Yeah.
their knockdowns early, it was like, wow, this is massively powerful. But like all of the dope Masons results are, you know, anti-navigators, right? They're all at the bottom.
Yeah.
And that's super appealing to me. However, I played my first Masons game the other day against a guy who I've been playing. He's on like his fifth game now, and like I won, but again, like I'm playing people who have played less than 5 games. It's meaningless. I don't really know how the guild works, but like uh I the turns are a mental puzzle because of just their like having Honor as a
Yeah.
captain, the permutations are bonkers. Like it's super nuts. And the
Definitely.
only thing that was obvious to me was like Flint score goal now. He kick far, right? Like I get it.
Yeah.
Where'd they go? Toward goal. That's where he's going. But the rest of it is like, do I stay in the Vet Harmony aura? Do I even play Vet Harmony with Honor because she can't do the link thing? I think so. Like, is she supposed to take this damage? She's supposed to rumble. Like, do I take brick if I take marbles? Like when do I want which chisel?
Hmm.
Is granted an auto take? Like all of this seems super hard to understand.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I mean they're like an incredibly complex guild. They're like the most I think they're the most complex guild that doesn't have the sort of strict control element. Like they don't really ever tell your opponent what to do.
Hmm.
Um, which is how they're different from the other from like morticians and hunters, which are like the other extremely complex guilds in my opinion. I guess not thinking about minor guilds for a second because red catchers are also very complex. But yeah, and I think a lot of what you said is right. I think the idea is that they output consistency and they rely on the fact that they're going to hit the second column a lot. That's sort of where their money makers are for like the
Hmm.
vast majority of their models. Sometimes third column, sometimes first column, but and they don't get a lot for spiking randomly in the way that a lot of other guilds do. Which is both a blessing and a curse. You don't really have to think about the top end of the playbook all that often. You just sort of be like, okay, every attack's going to be 2 damage, and then we go to the next model, right?
Hmm.
And then yeah, they have an absurd amount of defensive combinations. That's like the other thing is that like every time you activate a model, you're going to be thinking about like 2 or 3 other models' auras about like where to go and how to be there and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah, we were playing on Vassal, and I felt like like a total asshole because my side of the pitch just looks like this, right? It's just
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
there's just 20 auras on every model, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, I have to know, right?
There's this guy, friend of mine, who is a really good Masons player from South Carolina, I think, named Glenwood Morris, who he's a very good Masons player, and he's sort of embodying that fatigue because he always like sweats up a storm every time he plays a tournament game, and it looks like he's just come back from a war when he's done. Whether he
Right.
wins or
He's
loses is
he's
like
just looking 1,000 miles away.
yeah,
He's drenched. Yeah, got it.
North Carolina. Sorry, somebody corrected me, but yeah, he playing him on Vassal was an experience because it really was just like at some point he'd be activating, I'd just be like, yeah, you just tell me show me what it looks like when you're done. I don't care anymore. Like I
Right.
can't
Yeah.
I can't tell what's going on anymore. Like
Right.
there's just like 80 auras on every model. Um, but yeah, I guess okay. So in terms of, I think all 3 captains are good. I think maybe Corbelli is the best, but see, I think Corbelli is very strong, and I don't personally like the idea of playing him. Um, because I just really hate his playbook. I have this philosophy about this game that if you take a captain that can take 6 influence, it should be able to do a certain amount of damage, even if that's like so far out of its color pie that you're not even supposed to talk about it like that. Like I just think
Hmm.
that playing the game of Guild Ball effectively in a tournament setting means sometimes you have to rely on your model that can take 6 influence to do 6 damage with that 6 influence. And there's like a really good chance that Corbelli doesn't do that, so I hate that guy. But I am willing to admit that that's a personal bias about how I like to play the game. Um, I do think he's strong, and I think for people that can make the most of his making space rule, he's absurdly frustrating to deal with on the receive in like a kind of bizarre way. And okay, actually, so in our first session we talked about order and how order used to suck because they had to decide between benefiting from the
Winning
ball
and
and
doing their thing.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Corbelli is that, but I think Corbelli's is so strong that the fact that you probably only get his full gimmick for like 1.5 turns of every game is enough, if that makes sense. Like it's like there's a lot of the
He
game.
does the shock and awe that Order tries to do effectively enough that even though he kicks away his quote ball of light, after that you have enough of a lead that you can still win on the momentum.
Yeah, and I think it's not even just that it's so much more powerful than Order, because I think in like in a ideal circumstance for Order, even pre Ball of Light, they probably do something more impressive than what he does. But his is like so hands off no setup required. Like it's just like you have the ball. Okay, all 6 of your models are going to get a 4-inch dodge at some weird random point in this turn, and like if you can use that creatively and effectively, then it's just incredibly obnoxious. Is it because it has no range. The only restriction is that it happens to a model once per turn. Like it can be in any order.
Right.
It's so goofy, and the team
And
also
and the
has.
thing is, like, you can also, it works in a way where, at least the way that I read it, since you don't have to declare the target of the pass before you pass, like you can actually say like Corbelli is going to pass. Okay, cool, dodge. I'll pass to the guy that's now a legal target that wasn't a legal target before.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it also means that I think it's got to be either him or Yukai in the fish, but one of those two captains is by far the most focused on snapshots as like a legitimate playstyle that any captain has ever been in Guild Ball, because it is truly difficult to defend against snapshots against Corbelli because a model can.
Because you can kind of do the what is memory's power called, puppet strings.
Yeah,
You can
exactly.
kind of puppet strings with every activation where like someone's moving closer and closer to being
Right,
a
and
snapshot threat.
they can even do that just before it's kicked to them. Like basically, like so. Okay, so this is 8 inches, and then this is 12 inches. So Corbelli has the ball here. He can snapshot through Flint, like because he
Right.
declares the pass, and then Flint goes like this, right? So
Right.
it's like they're just it just expands the range of like what's a plausible snapshot so much, especially because it can also affect Corbelli, who has 5/8 kick, which is crazy, um, and very good for
So was
snapshots.
the only change to Corbelli in 4-2 that he could no longer target an enemy with the free ball, or an enemy with the ball, or did he gain something else?
I think that's the only change. There might have been something else, but I
Because
think
basically, like, he was apparently just super obnoxious when he dropped, and if he was just all of this plus then he had, I can LOL steal the ball from you. That seems pretty dumb.
I actually think he
I
might have lost even something else. I just can't remember what it was. Like I
and
think
he's
he, yeah,
still like in contention to be the best model. Like all I remember is that Pat's take on the errata was don't paint or learn how to play your core bellies, and I was like, oh
yeah.
shit, I guess he's bad. Like
Yeah, I actually don't think he's bad. I think we overreacted to the changes. I'm pretty sure his playbook changed in some way to get worse, but I can't remember. I just can't remember how. But yeah, he used to be even better than this. And the crucial thing, definitely the biggest thing, was that his legendary play used to be able to target a
an enemy model with
model.
the ball.
So it was
Yeah,
basically just like if Corbelli received, he got 2 free
two
goals.
goals.
It's
Yeah,
like
he's
it's
gonna
just,
get he gets the unstoppable turn one receive football striker captain goal, and then also whoever you put it on, like just kidding, legendary it off.
yeah,
Like it can be, roast in the corner with three people between you and the captain, and it doesn't matter.
yeah. Oh yeah, someone in my chat said the other difference was his momentous 2 used to be on 2, so he actually could like kind of hit stuff before.
And he could do six. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah. He was basically just like, okay, I'm going to score 8 points, and then my
Was
other
this
five
kind of a
models,
like
yeah.
doing the going a little bit deep on the game design slash marketing aspect of this? Like at one point, the Brewers like I was reading the Inspiring Hat article, Guild Ball year by year, and at one point the Brewers were just in the dumps. They needed help,
Mm,
and so they were like, well, whatever, we'll release Vet Decimate super hot, and then we'll key her down. Obviously, when we balance everything again later on, and
yeah,
so Vet Decimate 1.0 was like just ridiculous, like not even fair, obviously over the top, but it was what the Brewers needed to be competitive. And they weren't the best in the world. They were just like they were suddenly good, and Esther's was viable, and Vet Decimate
yeah,
it sort of enabled that, right?
right.
So was court like were the Masons doing poorly enough at the time to justify like y'all need a captain that can actually ball? Here is Corbelli, please get above 35% win rate. Like what was happening such that they needed to do that, or was it kind of just a development mistake?
I think it was just a mistake. The Masons were certainly not the best guild in the game at the time, but they were fine. Like I think they were like 50-ish% or like a little bit below, which is
Okay,
sort of
yeah.
what
If
you'd expect.
if you're in the middle of the pack, there's no reason to give you that straight hot fire. So
Yeah,
I get it.
yeah. But yeah, so I mean, Yeah, I guess the reason I like the other two captains more is they just feel more flexible in their game plan to me, and I think that they have a little bit more straightforward power, which is something that I appreciate. Um, I think I'm trying to think about some of the questions you asked about how to construct lineups. I do think that in general this guild builds lineups really flexibly.
Yeah,
Um,
so I'd like rather than trying to give me a six the way that you did for like butchers or nabs, right? Like
mm,
instead kind of go model by model and tell me like I would draft this if I saw an opponent that did Y, right?
yeah.
Like I am drafting a model X because I expect you to be conditions based, so I'm going to take, a condition clearing model, or I
Mm,
expect you to want to like I'm against casket, so I take vet harmony such that you can't put me in the timeout box for 2 turns. Like I get
right.
to choose who gets taken out, right? Like
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I guess to start off, I think these three models. So like I think you choose granite and then you choose brick and then you choose vet harmony, and I think in that sort of descending order is like how you build a defensive core for this team. And I think an important thing to understand about Masons is that a lot of times, because they don't kill things quickly, even though they can kill things, because it takes
Mhm,
many attacks to do so,
mhm,
against fighting teams, they either want to score like crazy and play Corbelli, particularly if you receive, or they want to slow the game down and make it take a really long time to kill their own models. And so the amount you want to do that is how many of these three you take, because Granite and Brick defend each other really well, and Harmony makes both of them even harder to kill. This core, for example, to me is a really huge pain in the ass for butchers, because butchers hate good counterattacks, and Granite and Brick and Harmony together makes all of your counterattacks good. Because Brick has an absurd counterattack on his own, so you have to remember that knockback is applied to everything. It's not just attacks during activation. So he actually has a 2-inch push on one and a 3-inch push on two, um, and he pulls you in first with Gravity Well.
dope.
Uh, so and then if Brick gets damaged, Granite can move, and you can do this stupid ass thing that I hate so much, where you attack Granite, who of the three is probably the most likely that you would want to hit, and then the damage is shifted from Granite to Brick, and then Granite walks away, um, taking a parting blow. And that's like infuriating to me because as a butchers player, because butchers don't have great knockdowns, so Granite doesn't even have to. Granite doesn't even have to worry about whether her sturdy was popped because it's probably not getting hit again. And Granite just fucking leaves. Um, so I think you wanna take Granite. I think you want to take Granite to answer your question almost all the time, if not all the time. She's just an extremely good model, and she's a little slow, but she defends people like nobody's business, and she can really just choose a model and say you're not going anywhere for this turn, like, and maybe I'll eventually kill you. Um, and then if you're up against really hard-hitting guilds, I think you add Brick and Vet Harmony to the mix because you want to create this like core of your team that's just incredibly difficult to take apart. Um, and then
So is that not, and I believe the answer is no, but I'm going to ask this question to hear the why. Is that not saying, well, if I spend captain and 3 slots on defense, then I only have 2 models that are winning me the game? Like, is that worth it? Like,
no,
what
because
what do I do with?
I don't actually think there's like a particularly defensive Mace's captain. I think no matter which of these captains you pick, you're picking an output model of some description.
Okay,
Like
okay,
I think all three of them are pretty good at scoring goals at least. Corbelli's obviously the best of them. And then Hammer's probably the most killy of them, but
yeah,
Honor flexes between the two, and Hammer can still score goals just fine. He's got a pretty linear threat, but it's there. Um, so no, I think you're choosing. The other thing about it is that Granite and Brick and Harmony together, or even just Granite and Brick, they can kill somebody. It's not the fastest, but they will generate a lot of momentum doing it because they're just going to hit their knockdowns and their gut and strings and then their momentous twos over and over. So I think maybe okay. Now that I'm thinking about this, and to answer your question, I think maybe this is a good way to think about the Masons. Is that because they're so consistent, you can expect what they're going to do every time they've spent influence, basically, and because their momentum is so centralized at the bottom of their playbooks, they're very often going to be doing multiple things every time they take an activation. And that's probably why it seems like any individual influence doesn't do all that much. Like 2 damage is fine, but there are models that do a lot more than 2 damage, right? But in other guilds. But like when Graded activates, she's going to lock down a model and she's going to reposition her auras to defend somebody else, and she's going to generate pretty much always 4 momentum. It's pretty hard to make Granite not generate 4 momentum from 4 influence. You have to do some really weird shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like the thing about it is like all of your models are going to do that. So if you're not doing something crazy with the ball, you could be like, okay, I have 13 influence. That means at the end of this turn I have 13 momentum, and that's the pool that I'm spending from for this whole turn. And you could
Right.
like think
So
really
I can
consciously about that.
spend rest, and courage, and still be up on you as long as I keep you under 7 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't think this core is like entirely defensive, but that is their main goal, and they're good at defending both themselves and other people. Um, and so for output models, you identified Flint. Flint really is the simplest model in the guild for sure. He's just a striker. He just strikes.
He
um,
seems just like, I mean, he's kind of like, if you look at the first release of the game, what does a striker look like? It's
mhm,
this guy. So he's very much a season 1 striker that like got a combined result when that became a thing of tackle dodge, but like
Yep.
he just does the thing. He
Yep.
has one rule, which is a striker dodge, because if you're a 1-inch melee model, you kind of have to have a viable dodge. So
Right.
he's got where'd they go, which is the good one, and then close control. Like
Yeah.
that's it. That's what the guy does.
Yep. I think it. Yeah. It is key to focus on close control, though. Close control is a really good model for, or a really good rule for a striker like this to have, because it just means that he has to think a lot less about counterattacks than a model
Counterattack,
like this
right?
normally would. So,
Right.
but yeah, he's just Mr. Goal guy. He will get you a goal. So if that's the kind of output you're looking for, you pick him. I think.
Does he show up in most, if not all, the lists in a kind of Friday way, or does he show up when I'm expecting to need to score a goal with someone who's not the captain?
Um, I think he's not quite as ubiquitous as Friday, but he's close. I think having that reliable of a striking threat is a really valuable thing for this team that's always going to be trying to do a bunch of different things at once. The only time I'd say not to play him is if you were like maybe if you were against like a really really painful 3-0 team, and well, but even then he's pretty good at holding the ball on his own, honestly. Because of close control, it's at least expensive to take it off of him. I'm trying to think about this. I haven't played a lot of Masons, but I've played against a lot of Masons. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think honestly, I think you'd be fine putting him in every list. It'd be close anyway. I think that I think there's like a circumstance where you draft a list like this where it's a hammer thing, and you're really just like, I don't know what mascot this would be. I guess Marvel's, sure, whatever. Or even maybe take one of these out for like a proper damage threat or a damage buff, like put in tower. But yeah, I think you do something like this where it's like against a team you're receiving, and you're against a team that you just feel like you absolutely want to force to come into you and be stuck in this like miry muck of a brawl for the whole game. Like maybe like farmers, and you just keep concussing them out because Brick can actually hit his concussion against farmers.
Mm.
You just make the game this horrible slog. And then you don't take Flint because you just want models that are defending each other the whole time and making themselves unkillable.
Right. And the reason that you're going as long as you are is because they have HPs that are, triple digits long or whatever, right? Like
Right.
I'm gonna be here for a while, so like rather than have Flint just yakety sax around the pitch, like everyone stay in this huddle and beat up this huge guy, like you're just hitting Windle until the cows come home.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, but I think it would be pretty niche that you don't take Flint, honestly. Uh, oh, and then so the chisels, I think both chisels are really good, and I think they do pretty completely different things. Obviously, the
Yeah.
first,
The dynamic between Chisel and Vet Chisel is just wild.
yeah,
Like they don't even resemble the same model.
yeah. So original chisel, O chisel is like sort of your fighty Flint, if that makes sense. Like she's just your like, okay, this is my game plan is to hit stuff, so
Hmm.
I need chisel to do that. Um, Chisel's reveling rule, where she gets armor if she takes out um, models, is sort of interesting to me. I guess as someone who likes to think about fighting and stuff, because she's sort of an example of an output model that's good for finishing a jail, like we were talking about earlier. Um, like
Yeah, because she can just start a turn at effectively 3 armor and then go beat down and have safety from counterattack. She can take parting blows well. Like if
yeah,
you, it's like how Vetox starts. He's really good at jailing because like you effectively throw up the old ways,
right.
and then he gets to meme around and have his aura. So like if she gets to top of the turn, start and say, actually I'll revel. That seems pretty interesting.
Yeah, and if she can, especially if she can kill somebody with one influence, then heroic for her Iron Fist, and then walk and hit somebody else 3 times. If that, I mean, that's gonna do like between 7 and 9 damage probably, depending on
Hmm.
most targets, and get you 4 momentum net. Um, well, that's a really good way to start a turn because you're putting pressure on a second model, and the key thing is that Chisel is relatively unassailable. Like 3/3 with 14 boxes will eventually go down, but it gives you time to kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Well, kind of get your team over to Chisel to be protecting her again,
Yeah.
even if
While
she's walked
while
up.
she's tanking effectively. She's not just going to die, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so then while they're spending their time fighting Chisel, like you're bringing the defensive core of however many of those 3 you brought over to fight.
Yeah, exactly. So I think she's pretty interesting in that way, but other than that little quirk, she's kind of just a beat stick, which is fine.
Hmm.
Um, so then if you feel like instead you don't want to beat stick,
If
uh,
instead you want to play 5D chess, here's Chisel 2.
yeah, exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
I feel like she and Honor are the most mentally taxing models that I've ever seen.
Yeah, she's pretty tough to deal with or to use. I think, to be fair, she can kind of go into a mode where she just follows around someone like Hammer and keeps buffing him. Like she's like tooled up on a stick for Hammer, plus also protects him from one knockdown, if that makes sense. Um,
Sure.
but you're right. There's a lot more
Then
going
you're
on
not
there.
really using adaptive strategy, right? Because like
Yeah.
I guess unless like let's say someone does hit Hammer with 2 knockdowns and she's already taken it, then like
Mm,
you can just even if he gets his activation canceled by some spike of the dice, like she can save the other 5 influence that are on him and ship them to someone else.
yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Um, but I definitely think the most interesting way to play her, and also the most complicated and difficult, is with Honor. So like you could do all sorts of stuff with these two. It's like, I mean, you can read them, and it sounds like you've thought about this and maybe even tried to do some of this stuff.
Yeah, no, I tried. It's wild. Like the
Yeah.
thing is, I think that the fact that it's a pulse
Mm,
is actually a mental buff. Like if it
yeah.
wasn't a pulse, I'm pretty sure it would be an unsolvable problem. Like it would just the amount of calculation that it would take to find optimum is
Yeah.
pretty unreal.
I think for what it's worth, the most straightforward way to use these two, probably the most intuitive, is Honor does something, moves forward, hits somebody a couple times, just brings the ball closer to the goal, whatever it is that she's doing. And then Superior Strategies herself ends her
Yeah.
activation, and then
And then
Chisel.
Chisel feeds her something
Yeah,
from someone else that was their only job was being a bigger denominator for honor, right?
yeah,
But you
exactly.
kind of have to do that going into the turn. Like I
Yes.
think that I kind of see the adaptive slash superior strategy combo as having 2 implementations. Implementation 1 is this is the plan. Like what I'm doing is cheating some influence cap on some model. And therefore, all Honor needs to do is superior strategy that model. That model needs to activate, and then Chisel will go allocate more influence to that model. And I think that like that's I don't know. To me, it seems pretty disruptible.
Mm,
And if it gets disrupted, it seems like a disaster. Like
yeah.
you have just misallocated a bunch of influence to some model that doesn't have anything productive to do, unless
Mm,
they are doing a good roast impression, like they can't find something valuable to do with it.
yeah.
So then instead, and then so implementation 2 is uh, actually on the fly. Oh shit! The thing that I was doing with my turn is not as good as this other thing I could be doing on my turn. Now instead, I want to do this because I don't know. You dodged in a way I didn't expect, or you got a lucky tackle, and now I want Mallet to activate again so he can go be a 3-inch jerk at
Right.
someone's face again, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely right. And really, I mean, other than the captains, yeah, it's just it's a good balance, but a shame that you can't take both chisels together because
I
really,
know they're
adaptive
so dope.
strategy would be very
Yeah,
sick with
on her,
the
yeah,
other
on
chisels.
her.
Yeah,
Like all I
but
want to do is make Chisel do more beatdowns, right?
yeah, but yeah, I think you've got the basic idea, and a lot of I think so. You can spend a lot of time, and if you're going to play a lot of Masons, you should spend a lot of time thinking about turn one plays with things like adaptive strategy and superior strategy. But I think beyond turn one, it's almost not worth trying to shadowbox that type of stuff, and you just kind of want to get reps in and try to see where it's like, oh wait, this
I
would
could
have
have
gone
done this,
better if
right?
I got a second activation and sort of delayed by one activation or something, because they're so situational and there's such a commitment in how you're spending their resources that it's like kind of, at least to me, the way I see the game, it's kind of nonsensical to try to come up with like a mid game
Yeah, obviously.
scenario.
Like the what yeah, the when do I call an audible on the play? Well, you call an audible when the situation requires that you call an audible. What play do I call? Well, dog, it comes down to what you need to do, right? Like
Right,
this is not
exactly.
something I can tell you, right?
Yeah.
So that makes sense. I was kind of hoping that the answer was Chisel was so good you never play Vet Chisel, so you don't have to think about it. But it sounds like the answer is yeah. Occasionally, I will need to engage the brain melty virus and go deep.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think you could get away with playing O Chisel for a lot of the time because she is really good. I mean, she can do a lot of damage. You can even, I mean, there are a couple ways you can add more damage. You can play Tower, which I don't think a lot of people do anymore. I think he's
I
just,
think he's just bad, right? Like I mean,
yeah,
he's tooled up, but like what else is he, man? He sucks.
yeah,
He's like
he's,
half spigot, half brick, all shit. Like I don't really
yeah,
understand what he's trying to do here. I mean, tooled up is very good and it stacks with Iron Fist, but like
yeah.
Jesus, dude.
Yeah, the
Like
tooled
a
up,
lame.
he's basically just tooled up on a stick because he's trying to do this like pushy control thing, but you're probably getting that from the rest of the guild some way or the other, and protects those close is situationally very good, but the nice thing about Vet Chisel is she has a worse protect those close, but it's on
That
all the
always
time.
works. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
so,
And like it also kind of does things that protect those close doesn't do in
right.
situations where it matters.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so he's pretty hard to fit in. Uh,
What about Mallet, Champ, Wrecker, and Marbles?
yeah, so I think to me both Mallet, well, hmm, man, I don't know how exactly to use Champ, but I think she's good. I mean, she
She
goes very far.
reads nuts.
Yeah, I think I think the way I would think about it is Champ would probably come in on an honor or Corbelli list when you were really committing to goals, and it would probably be in addition to Flint and whichever of those two captains you chose. Because with Corbelli especially, she can be pretty oppressive. Having one or more 4-inch dodges on top of all of her movement is pretty obnoxious. I think it's relatively niche and maybe not even worth telling you, but models like Champ, specifically models that have stamina, are really vulnerable to movement control, like fire or
Right, because
like
it applies twice.
yeah, or knockdown because they can't stand up before they take their stamina jog, even if they spend
Oh,
momentum
I
on it.
wasn't even thinking about that.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
because it's at the beginning of the model's activation. Yeah, no, that's
yeah,
absolutely something to tell me. Like that's the
yeah,
kind of thing where it's like, if you, yeah, you walking into it is the way to learn it. Like
yeah,
face planting into rules like that is the worst way to learn. But there are so many rules that happens with. Like the Hearthstone doesn't really have a rule book online, and the way that you learn Hearthstone rules is to literally lose games, right? And like
right,
League of Legends is kind of the same way, except there's so
yeah,
much content that you can figure it out. But like most of the time, you're like, oh, it works like that because I'm dumb and I lost, right? Like, and
yeah,
so
yeah.
learning about that, but also like I played my first Navs game. I was empowered by our Navs conversation, so I played against the Navigators. And I started out making some good decisions, and then because it was my first clock game as well, so I was playing
Ooh,
against the
rough.
Ratcatchers for the first time on clock, playing Navigators for the first time on clock, and then I just started making some really bad decisions, like impressively bad. After the game, I went back and I was like, huh, if I did any one of these three things differently, I think the game is not only winnable, I'm actually not sure how I lose. Uh, so that was a fun learning experience.
Yeah.
The guy that I played is the guy that I play most often. He's the Brewers player, and he
Mhm.
it was also his first time on clock. We're both very slow. We're just the worst people imaginable. So I was like, I'm buying a clock. We're playing on clock because you and I can't be trusted. And I think our girlfriends will, well, his wife, my girlfriend, will leave us if we play Guild Ball until 2 a.m. again.
Yeah.
So we're playing, and then I uh, I figured out that every time I kick the ball, he gets the ball back. But I figured that out like 3 times too late, and he scored 3 goals. But when I was trying to fight Bonesaw, like if I had put a move, if I had gotten strung him or whatever there's a slow play in Nabs. I don't remember who
Grasping
has it.
Earth. Yeah, Ebbs.
Grasping Earth. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
Ebbs thing.
Yeah, it's
So
minus
if I
four
had
on.
done that,
Yeah.
like it would have been a lot easier to keep him out of being a like phase through walls snapshot threat in front of the goal.
Yeah, or even just knock them down with Azimuth. Yeah, these models with stamina, there's not a lot in the game, but the ones that have it, they go from like very fast to sort of comically slow and bad very quickly.
Because they're balanced around having stamina, right?
Yeah, right.
So the idea of the fact that it's at the start of it's upkeep in Magic Lingo. Like
yeah,
what this
exactly.
does is you can't actually stand up unless another player does it, at which point it's still a momentum tax, right? Like,
Right.
and I have one more activation to answer to it. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, she feels like a sort of a sixth player, if that makes sense. Like I don't really think I would ever build a strategy around her, but she is the next best threat on the ball to Flint. It might even be better than Flint in a fair amount of circumstances. The thing that I don't like about her, this is her character play seems like dead text to me because the people she would want to put it on in this guild already
Already
have
have
close,
it.
close
Yes,
control.
correct. Yeah, that's why I wasn't sure. Like when you're like you take her in addition to Flint, like my initial reaction was, huh, okay. I would have thought that because he has close control, that makes her play less
Yeah.
valuable. And then I thought, oh well, maybe I'm just not supposed to cast it, or she casts it on herself. That's the joke. I don't know, man.
I think
But
I
yeah,
think
I
the
think the
best
rest of her
use
is what's better.
definitely, but I think the best use of that is you put the close control thing on honor, and then that makes her goal threat a little bit better because she can take like one parting blow from somebody or something. But
Right,
um,
and if you're doing it straddling a superior strategy turn, if they try to tackle you during that downtime, then you have the close control.
yeah, yeah. Mallet, I think is pretty good, but he's sort of hard to fit into a list. You'd have to be going a little bit more offensively. I would pair him personally with Hammer most often because I think Hammer is the model in the guild that's most interested in hitting the top of his playbook because his Hammer hitting the fourth column of his playbook on the first swing he makes on a model, the one that's a 2 KD printed, so often
Yeah,
a 3
it's
KD,
it's the damage knockdown rule. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
is that's a dramatic difference in his like expected damage output if that first attack both knocks down and does damage,
And so
especially if he's
that's
got
at
Iron
that point
Fist
you're
or something.
taking him for singled out, really.
Yeah, you're taking him for singled out and chip damage. I mean, he fights well on his own. It's just not he just doesn't fight well enough that that's like the only reason you take him. Um, and then Football Legend is one of those rules that's like you never take a model for Football Legend, but it's always nice to have.
You're like, oh cool, I've got football legend, dope,
Yeah,
let's go. Yeah,
it makes if you're receiving, it makes your first turn a lot less stressful because you'll probably get like two or three of your kicks
yeah,
under Football
yeah.
Legend.
Instead of God, dude, missing passes is so obnoxious.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it's awful. um, and then yeah, I just think yeah, he's got some good quirks to him. Like he has a respectable knockdown, especially if he singles out first. And maybe like once every 4 or 5 games, you'll get a sweet smash shins off that really pisses your opponent off. So
Yeah, the fact that it's not once per turn is super interesting to me. And the one
yeah,
game that I played with him, like I was like, oh, I'll smash a bunch of shins. I never really did that. Like he kind of just like took advantage of a lot of gang ups because his melee zone is huge, and
yeah,
then he didn't get counterattacked a bunch. And yeah, I don't know. He seemed like an easy take for me because I didn't really understand that. Like I took advanced calculus chisel instead of normal
yeah.
chisel, and so I thought that he was the obvious fighty guy. Uh,
Yeah, I mean he's a very good squire to an obvious fighty guy, whether that's
yeah,
Hammer or O Chisel or even like Honor. He
yeah.
makes any
Allow
of
me
those
to
much better.
single him out and put him on the ground. Here you go. Yeah.
Exactly. He even makes like Brick or Granite hit respectably hard if he goes in first. So I think it's he's sort of both his strength and his downside is that he pretty much always wants to be an early activation. He's not as great if about like piling buffs on him himself and making him go hit somebody 4 times. It won't do as much as you're hoping, but
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I think he's pretty good. And then in terms of mascots, I think you almost always, probably always want to take marbles with honor because of the assist thing. But beyond that, it's sort of your flavor, your choice. Wrecker does that thing that Ram does where he pushes everybody up at the start of the game, but then
Right.
Wrecker is so fast that you really can get
Dude, he's Sonic the Hedgehog, and his
yeah.
playbook is bananas. Right,
Yeah.
like Marbles reads nuts because he has Goad, which I think is incredibly strong. Countercharge and Love Creature. Like, if you
Yeah.
were to pick like three of the strongest mascot powers, like
Yeah.
I think that's all three of them, right? And then
Yeah.
I read Wrecker, and it's like, wait, am I supposed to take Wrecker? Like, holy shit! Because his second column is bananas.
It
It's
is.
so good.
Yeah. And you really, him being 8 base move means that pretty much every time he activates you can change the like fight math of a fair amount of the pitch. Like you can
Right.
move crowd outs and so forth. And yeah, he's tanky enough that he's kind of a pain in the ass to kill for only 1 point. There are definitely some teams that will kill him. I usually try to kill him with the types of guilds that I like to play, like Butchers or Union or whatever, because I think it's worth getting him off the pitch. But a lot of teams do not have that luxury. Most mixed teams will never really try to kill him, which is great for you. So
Yeah,
um,
he just rolls around being a jerk. And I think like this is stealthily like I haven't played a game with him yet, but I was hoping that Marbles was an okay take in a lot of situations because I think that playing Wrecker like it's another axis to think about and it's like a spatial axis, right? So like
yeah,
I'm no longer thinking about just order of activations, output of dice, like probabilities, math, things like that. Like now I'm thinking of like, oh shit, I actually have to look at like X and Y axis. Like I have to like look at the pitch and figure out where he's actually going. And it is so many pushes. It's
yeah,
so many pushes. He's fast as hell. And
yeah,
like the amount that he does for zero influence is truly impressive in a way
yeah.
that like not many mascots are
Well,
to
that's
me.
actually true of both of these mascots in this case, though. I was gonna say, looking at these, I never thought about this before, but so different guilds have different levels of mascot strength, and they're sort of balanced internally. Definitely, Masons are one of the best mascot guilds, but I also was thinking about this as like probably part of the issue with mental load with Masons is I think this guild definitely has the most complex mascot activations in the game.
Like by a lot, right?
Like,
Like
yeah,
it's they're actually hard. Like
yeah,
even allocating zero, it's hard, and then like whether or not you give marbles one for goad is also like
yeah, definitely.
not obvious, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
All right. Well,
yeah. You got to get to a
excellent.
Destiny raid or something, right?
I do. Actually, 3 minutes ago,
Yeah,
I'm gonna be late. They can wait for me. It'll be fine.
yeah,
But I super appreciate this. Thanks for reaching out. This was I expected to sort of not understand the Masons, and I still kind of don't. But I'm glad that there's not like an obvious six, and that all the squaddies get to do stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Next time, close out with the big scaries because I
Hmm.
think morticians are like in the way that Masons attracted me because they're super adaptable and you get to do whatever. I think that like although I think the last time we talked about hunters I got stuck. I think there's enough control there and enough memes there that I think I'm going to be a hunters player. But there's still the specter on the horizon of the morticians, and I think that like they are the kind of black hole of complexity where if you have infinite mental load and you are alpha going,
Hmm.
then like suddenly they are the guild that can do everything. Like they might actually be the most powerful, assuming everyone was playing optimally. But like because people make mistakes, the morticians are not just overpowered. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
So excited to finish the chats, but thanks again for your time, and we should schedule the next one. Appreciate it.
yeah. All right. Talk to you later, man. This was fun.
Have a good one. Bye.
See ya. Thanks for watching, everybody who is. I think I'm gonna be doing one more of these with Andrew. Yeah. Have a good night, everybody.